शान्ताकारं भुजगशयनं पद्मनाभं सुरेशं विश्वाधारं गगनसदृशं योगिभिर्ध्यानगम्यं वन्दे विष्णुं भवभयहरं सर्वलोकैकनाथं वन्दे विष्णुं भवभयहरं सर्वलोकैकनाथम्. Lord Vishnu's will, sometimes he gives us good memory, sometimes he makes us forget a line. Friends, we have been seeing facets of self-knowledge in the Upanishads. The self is our own true nature. The Upanishads hold that we are the self. All that is therefore required is to dismiss false notions that have somehow held us captive. Somehow error has crept in our self-perception. This mind of ours, with regard to the question, who am I, comes forth with some erroneous answer or the other. This needs to be removed, but that's not an easy job. Anadi avidya is the word used. Beginningless ignorance. In a manner of saying, we call it beginningless. Of course, it is beginningless, but I said in a manner of saying because when anybody hears the expression beginningless, one first imagines time as an unquestionable entity. Time as an axis is very much there, and certain things have a beginning. They start at T1, a point of time, T1, and they end at another point of time, T2. And this ignorance, one imagines, has no such beginning. Point T1 doesn't apply to it. It has been there, we don't know when. Nobody questions the validity of the axis of time itself. Therefore we said, though in a manner of time we say it is beginningless, we hasten to clarify that ignorance is something which is subtler than time itself. Time is a product of ignorance. One is not to imagine ignorance as being stationed on the axis of time. It's rather the other way. time and space appear in the conception following ignorance. Therefore, this avidya, this ignorance, to be eliminated is simply unthinkable, but Upanishads are capable of doing it. Upanishads, as a revelation, as a pramana, as a means of knowledge, have that unparalleled ability to eliminate avidya. Therefore, they are the ekamatra pramana. They are the only means of this unique vilakshana jnana. There is no other knowledge comparable with this awakening. You and I can rise, can wake up from a misconception that has been holding us hostage for once more a beginningless time. This evening we will go into the place of reason, the place of tarka, place of logic, place of what we usually employ in order to figure out something. As you know, traditionally, tarka or reason has been put forth with, at least to start with, the simple illustration of how somebody comes to know there is fire on the hill by seeing smoke. By seeing smoke, one infers. How does one infer? One has seen smoke at other places, like in a kitchen. When there was smoke, one knows cooking is going on. Or some other place too. Having seen at kitchen or some other campus, some other playground, wherever, having seen where there was fire, there was smoke. Today, a man sees smoke on top of a hill and then infers, if there is smoke, there must be fire. So the question now is, can we figure out the Atma? Can we figure out that we are the pure existence awareness, Satyam Jnanam, through such inference, through such reasoning? The Upanishads, with regard to this point, have said emphatically in the Kathopanishad, Lord Yama declares, Naisha tarkena matihi apaneya. The prose order of that is, Esha matihi, this understanding, tarkena na apaneya. Apaneya in today's Paninian Sanskrit is prapaniya. This understanding, this mati, is not possible to attain, not possible to get by tarka. Oh, then this is a utterly irrational business, someone may say. This is not an irrational business. I would quote Radhakrishnan, Dr. Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan, who had said, religion is not against reason, religion is beyond reason. When you say it is beyond reason, it is very different from saying it is against reason. Religion accommodates reason, but is not limited to reason, or it is not within the reach of reason. One has to go a bit further. One has to go beyond. Therefore, we would say, how do we gain self-knowledge? It is through the revelation that is available, and now there are two possibilities. We have said in earlier lectures too, if somebody's mind is very pure, very receptive, which is extremely rare to find, we must admit, but once in a while, somebody, let us say, has a lot of vairagya, lot of detachment, because what holds us back or what causes us to get derailed, what causes a diversion, what causes us or makes us cling to something in spite of the truth being placed right in front of us, is our attachment. Leave alone this Brahma Vidya, even in ordinary mundane matters, when you and I are attached to something, everybody telling us don't do it will fail to persuade us. We would be wanting to do just what we wanted to do because we are attached to it. And when we don't want to do something, all our friends, relatives and others telling us, please do it, will not work. That's the power of attachment. Sometimes in front of them we say also, yeah, I will do it. If you say, I will do it. And the friend goes that way and we don't do what we had just agreed to do. Attachment, even in mundane matters, is a powerful factor. What to talk of this extraordinary change of position? We have taken the position, we are this personality, we lost here or we gained there. We are better than him or not as good as her. We have taken a position. This ahankara, this ahankriti, this identification with the personality is marked by, is characterized by a certain position. I once asked a person who had attended my Who Am I classes for years, tell me honestly, when you inquire, who am I, what answer do you get? Do you get the answer, I am Atma, not this body? He said to me, with due respect to you, though I have been attending all these classes and I enjoy them also, the answer I get when I ask myself, who am I, honestly speaking, is I am Mahalakshmi's husband. Mahalakshmi, his wife. For we have anchored ourselves. When people ask me, who are you? I have been talking on Upanishads for 30 years now. You think I say to them, I am Brahman? Of course, even if I were to be Atmanishta, one doesn't go about saying like that. But otherwise too, honestly, I find myself telling them, well, I am primarily a spiritual teacher. I speak on Gita and Upanishads. Then I smile at myself. Oh, see, this is my identification. I dare not say I am Brahma. In the lectures we go into it. I am caught in, not to mention other, identifications of mine. I make selected confessions. In a respectable way, I say to friends, I am a speaker on Brahman. I dare not say I am Brahman. So whether you or me, she or he, I am trying to illustrate more than humor or some confession here. I am trying to illustrate how all of us are stuck, all of us are caught in a certain identity. And that identity, that identification, obviously, is a work of thought, thinking. Thinking gives shape, gives color, gives form to very many things in life, if not all. Even Shakespeare had said somewhere, there is nothing right or wrong. Thinking makes it so. Something like that. Those of you who are students of Shakespeare might know the words exactly, but it's something to the effect. There is nothing right or wrong, but thinking makes it so. So, we are caught in a certain thought pattern, and just logic would not help. Our attachments are too powerful. Our attachments, in fact, try to push us in some logic that is favorable to our attachments. What you call Anukula Sindhu. I like this line of thinking. Let me go for it, and so on. So the liking and disliking, raga and dvesha, of which Lord Sri Krishna talks a lot in Bhagavad Gita, raga and dvesha, they come in the way of gaining knowledge. And therefore we already said, someone with great vairagya, category 1, vairagya, what is vairagya? Absence of raga. Ragasya abhavaha viragaha. Viragasya bhavaha vairagyam. With a great amount of vairagya, someone may see, I am the pure Satchit by Shravana itself. But for a whole lot of others, category 2, where the majority of us belong, Shravana itself doesn't work. Therefore it is that once more, quoting from the original Upanishads themselves, I would say, Shravana has been tied up with 2 more steps, Manana and Nididhyasana. The Upanishads, original Upanishads, say this in the Brihadaranyaka. One fine morning, the very learned Rishi, scholar, highly respected sage, saint, respected by kings and emperors and whatnot, Yajnavalkya. One fine morning he says to Maitreyi, Are Maitreyi, my dear wife, I am leaving. I shall go, leaving all this property. I am going to divide this property and give to you and my second younger wife, Katyayani. Maitreyi and Katyayani are to enjoy all the property, and I love you, I wish you well, be well, both of you, enjoy this property, but I need to go. And he is set. And Maitreyi, older in age, Vayovruddha also, and mature, older in certain wisdom, Jnanavruddha also. Vayovruddha and Jnanavruddha. She says, all right, I would not oppose you, I would not stand in your way, but my dear husband, tell me one thing. If I accept this proposal you are making, I take all this wealth. You have not only been scholarly, learned and wise, you have been smart enough to acquire whole lot of wealth. What you leave behind for us is not less. I am elaborating this. This is all not said in the Brihadaranyaka. But I am saying it without taking undue liberty. I should say that I am taking some liberty without adding some questionable dimension to my elaboration. So Maitreyi asks an interesting question. If I stay with this wealth that you are leaving to us, to me and Katyayani, will that give me amrutattva? will it take me beyond death? Literally, Amrutattva is beyond death. I am fond of translating Amrutattva in the light of some studies I have done as beyond time. Death conjures up one picture before us. Time, I think, is a subtler expression. Death and time go together. What is death after all? Something which is before us today, but is not there at another point of time. Death, therefore, is closely linked to time. What is subject to time? What is bound by time? What is limited to time? Dies. So, Amrutattva is what is not limited to time, what's not bound by time. Therefore, will it lead me to Amrutattva was the question. And there is a famous line in this dialogue leading to this explicit mention of Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. Before that wonderful line comes, there is a line in the mouth of Sri Ajnavalkya. Amrutattvasya na ashasti vittasya. Vittasya, or vittad maybe, sorry if I slightly remember wrongly. From wealth, Amrutattvasya asha na asti. There is no hope through wealth. However much you may have amassed, staying in your own country or going to big cities, going abroad or whatever way, the moha of vitta is very powerful. Even those of us who are supposed to have renounced, when we pick up the newspaper and read about somebody who made lot of money, who conducted maybe his daughter's wedding, spending some huge number, our eyebrows go up. Oh, really? Will he give a donation to my ashram? Forgive me for this unwarranted humor here. Wealth has its charm, but the Upanishads say very coldly, the cold truth is presented before us. Vittat, from wealth, Amrutattvasya asha na asti. No hope. Then Maitreyi says, in that case, what will I do with all this wealth? How you and I wish we were like Maitreyi. How instantly. We normally postpone. We say, once this is over, that is over. Something or the other always is pending. Once I build my house, once my son is married, once my book is released, something or the other. When I left my job long back and went full time for spirituality, a colleague of mine at a place where I was working said, even I want to do this. Then why don't you come? You also come with me. Let's go join the ashram. Then he said, I will do it, but first I want to go to the Gulf and make some money. I asked him, I see, just for a few years. Then he said, I first want to make money, have a cushion. Money gives you a cushion. Then I will go after Kishan. Kishan is Krishna. Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna. You go ahead, I will catch up with you. Pretty soon I will come. Here only in Bangalore. I was working somewhere. So my colleague said. So I was no different really. See, joining an ashram by itself doesn't make full renunciation. To become a member of this mission or that ashram, even to wear this dress or that, some sign, to change the name, how we wish renunciation was as simple as changing a name. It's not so easy. Renunciation is another mystery, how renunciation happens. All right. So Maitreyi had that intense dispassion. What will I do with all this? I too would like to come with you. And then following that, there is this beautiful statement by Sri Yajnavalkya. First he says, there are other lines which are also famous. Atmanastu kamaya sarvam priyam bhavati. But then at the end of that very famous passage, he says, Atma va are drashtavyaha. If you and I wish to conquer death, if you and I wish to come upon something which is not bound by time, the timeless, you want to come upon the timeless, then Atma drashtavyaha. One ought to know the pure self, Atma. And how is one to know the pure self? That is where the Upanishads themselves give Atma va are shrotavyaha. The word used is shrotavyaha, leading to or paving the way or laying the foundation for a major sadhana, major spiritual practice, if you want to call it so, called Shravana, listening. You got to listen to someone who has that insight. And what Brihadaranyaka says in one fashion is said in other Upanishads in other fashions. The famous mantra of Kata we already quoted. In Kata it was Prapya Varan Nibodhata. Uttishtata Jagrata Prapya Varan. Go to competent teachers and Nibodhata. Get to know it. As one of you whispered already, in Mundaka the famous mantra goes, Parikshya lokan karmachitan brahmano nirvedamayat. One must come upon vairagya. Nirveda means vairagya. Nirvedamayat nasti akrita kritena. And then tadvijnanartham saha gurum eva abhigachet shrotriyam brahmanishtam. Sa gurumeva abhigachet samitpanihi shrotriyam brahmanishtam. Gurum, the word guru itself is used there. Somewhere else the word could be acharya. Chandogya Upanishad has acharyavan purusho veda. That person who has an acharya would come to know. Because this is so extraordinary, this is so unusual. This is not something that one can just figure out by logic. Because it is so vilakshana. And our logic, Acharya Shankara makes it clear at some places, this logic cannot be relied upon. In fact, one word he uses in his commentary on Brahma Sutras is Purusha Mati Vairupyat. Purusha Mati. Mati is our buddhi, our intellect. The intellect that you and I have, the intellect that even Nobel Prize winners have, economics and science and such subjects. Purushamati, the human mind, the human intellect, all said and done, Purushamati Vairupyat. Take the word Rupa. Rupa means form. Virupa is Vivida Rupa. It assumes all kinds of forms. Rupa, Virupa, and abstract noun is Vairupya. Purushamati Vairupyat Tarkanam Pratishthitatvam Ashrayitum Na Shakyam. I am presenting it in the prose order. Shankaracharya writes, Na Pratishthitatvam Tarkanam Shakyam Ashrayitum Purushamati Vairupyat. So the prose order is Tarkanam Pratishthitatvam, the finality. Pratishtita means final. I first used the word reliability. A better translation by the great Swami Satchidanandendra Saraswati goes the finality. Finality of speculations, tarka, is not at all reliable, not at all dependable. Ashrayitum na shakyam. Speculation is unbridled, for men's minds are diversely inclined. Men's minds are diversely inclined. Acharya Shankara is very precise, and I wish to give a passing compliment to Swami Satchidanandra Saraswati. Yesterday also I mentioned his name, his book. Though some of his views have been not accepted by other scholars, that's a different matter. I have been studying on and off his works. I must say that his translations and the justice he does to the original works is amazing. Even if he has a different view, some of you were talking about it, that there is no Mula Vidya, there's some view. About that there is a lot of controversy. He doesn't bring it into his translation. Translation is so accurate in Kannada and some of these places in English. The translation of Shankara's commentaries is, to my knowledge, most accurate at the hands of Swami Satchidanandendra Saraswati. Then when it comes to some interpretation, he puts it as a separate footnote, and then he says, hats off to him. I highly respect that approach. You don't meddle with the translation. You give the translation, then say, some people take this statement of Adi Shankara in this way. Actually, it means this way. That is the author's, the translator's personal view. He puts it as footnotes, I have noticed, at all places. He doesn't twist or turn the translation to suit his viewpoint. That is great intellectual honesty. That is great purity of mind. Very saintly, the scholar and saint come together in that approach. So, coming back here, logic, Purushamati Vairupyat, our logic, our human mind, our human intellect, men's minds are diversely inclined. Therefore, what is the place of logic then? So should we dismiss logic, throw logic out of the whole scheme? No. Logic cannot bring you self-knowledge, but we already said, Upanishadic revelation brings you self-knowledge. But then you say, but I heard enough of Upanishadic revelations. Who knows, some of you might have even kept a count of how many satsangs you have attended. This is the 1230th satsang I am attending, Swamiji, you may say. Some speakers keep record of lectures they give. It's nothing wrong about it. Why not? Some habits. Like some people keep precise account of every rupee they spend. Right? Account. Nothing wrong with it, but everyone doesn't have to do it. I know some people who even with respect to lakhs of rupees also they are careless. One of my friends actually once lost 3 lakhs of rupees. He figured it out very slowly. And an interesting person. Though he came to know, of course it pained him a little bit. He figured out that somebody must have stolen and some ooha, some guess how it went, he came to know. But then, divine as he was, he said, it's all right. The statement he made before me, I can never forget. He said, I have always believed that whatever should come to me, should stay with me, will come and will stay. Whatever is not supposed to come to me or not supposed to stay with me, will not stay, it will go. So that has been my belief, and this amount, though large, was not meant to be with me. And if that person whom I suspect has stolen it, who has breached my trust, God will look after him. God will look into it. God will punish him. I don't want to take the law in my hands, divine law. This was his position. But he confessed that on and off it pains me, it hurts me, that most probably someone very close to me has taken away the money. I don't know why that money came. You may say, I have heard Tattvamasi, Aham Brahma, all the Mahavakyas so many times. In Delhi and Bombay, in Bangalore and Calcutta, in Europe and America, I have gone and heard. So you are putting us in a very difficult situation, sir, you may say to me. On one hand, you say logic doesn't give us self-knowledge. On the other, even as you say Upanishadic revelation can give self-knowledge, it has not delivered goods for me. So I am neither here nor there. What am I to do? That is how, yesterday also it came up to some extent. On one hand, it is the purification of the mind. On the other, you see, along with making the mind purer, you have to use logic subservient to the Shravana, not independently. Shravana is the primary means. And for those who are ready, who are truly receptive, it is complete in itself. But for those of us whom already I called the second category, for those of us for whom Shravana by itself did not work, we got to engage in making our equipment purer. It's like though the object is right in front of us, suppose we are unable to see, maybe there's something wrong with our eyes, some obstacle, maybe some dirt has fallen into the eyes. Let's go and wash our eyes and come back. Some netra dosha, defect of eyes. Maybe I have to go for an operation. Let me go for an operation and then see. Right? So purify your mind and then employ logic, and the Upanishads themselves give various forms of logic. Now this logic is different from the independent logic that human mind may use or try to use. This logic is Shruti Anusari, Shruti Anukula. Such logic that is conducive, that falls in line with the Shruti statements. Therefore, logic has a place not as primary instrument or means, but as a secondary, subservient means. And that is the significance of the second part of Yajnavalkya's advice to Maitreyi. Atmava are shrotavyaha. Number one, mantavyaha. One must do manana. Manana is using logic in a conducive manner to make the statement of the Upanishads which was not clear enough. It was not clear enough for us to anchor ourselves in the highest knowledge. Adi Shankara takes the example, for example, in his commentaries. There is the statement Tattvam Asi, Mahavakya. And in spite of hearing that and hearing many expositions, suppose you and I are not able to let go. We are not able to do the neti neti. We are not able to drop, abandon our strong position, identity. We have numerous identities. Some people suffer from even identity based on caste, creed, whose grandson or granddaughter he or she is. I met somebody recently who said very proudly, I studied, in All India Institute of Medical Sciences. I said, when was that? Oh, I'm a very senior person, 1956 or something, he said. Long back. But even now he carries and looks down at other doctors. People go to those doctors, they study, they got their MBBS from some ordinary college. I got it from AIIMS, something like that. Well, ultimately you got to know where to draw the line between healthy pride and an unhealthy egoism. So, that's also an identity. In countless ways, attachments, identifications hold us, they shackle us, they tie us down. Imagine a bird, healthy bird, is trying to fly, then it realizes, then it finds out that it cannot fly. Someone has put a thread and then tied that thread to a heavy stone. Attachment is sometimes compared with a heavy stone to which a bird could be tied. Though the bird has strong wings, it's unable to fly. Though you and I have sometimes a lot of intelligence, if we have some attachment which blinds our vision, then we cannot fly. Dhana moha, stri moha, purusha moha, pada moha, bhasha moha, desha moha. So many moha, so many forms of delusion can, capture us, hold us, seize us. So, you do Shravana, and Shankara says, taking Tattvamasi, in order to really grasp the true meaning of Tattvamasi, one has to extremely clearly understand what is the meaning of Tat, what is the meaning of Tvam, to make the identity possible, to make their oneness possible. One has to grasp, when you take Tat, which to begin with stands for Ishvara, God, and Tvam, to begin with, it means an individual. If I were to ask my long-time student, what is the meaning of Tvam? He will say Mahalakshmi's husband. That is where you begin, because he has a strong attachment, strong bond with his wife. So I am Mahalakshmi's husband, he thinks. Right? Is it love or is it attachment? If something holds you back from intense and deep appreciation of Vedanta, it is attachment. In love, you do not get held back. In love, bond or in love, relationship can sit lightly in love. If one has love, one doesn't have to go away, one doesn't have to stay, one does what is right as per situation. But in attachment, undue importance is given. Putting everything else behind, it becomes a condition, Your study of Vedanta also becomes conditional study. With a condition, I am ready to study the Vedanta, provided it doesn't come in the way of my being husband of Mahalakshmi. That kind of situation arises. Never mind. So, manana. Who here doesn't have, some attachment or the other? We have many, in fact. They come in rotation sometimes. Morning we are attached to our spouse. Afternoon we say, I don't care anymore, enough is enough. But we are attached to our house in the afternoon. In the evenings, the books we wrote. And some other time, if not anything else, as it is said, someone who has renounced is likely to be attached to the idea, I have renounced everything. That's what is said to be the meaning in the Gita. Akarmani karmayaha. Karmani akarmaya pashyet, akarmani cha karmayaha. Someone has gone away to Himalayas and apparently, outwardly he is into akarma. He is not into do anything. But as even he sits below the tree there or by the bank of Ganga, maybe contemplating on Vedanta statements or doing some japa with all love, there is a thought in him which he may sometimes recognize, sometimes may not recognize. There is an undercurrent. You know how much I have given up to come here? All the way from that small town in Tumkur or Mandya district. I have come a long way. The amount of things that I have given up, it's not, So suppose there is a thought. So though he is sitting there, maybe in just on a summer day, just with 2 pieces of cloth, 1 piece of cloth, everything else makes him seem a great sannyasi. But Gita says, in that akarma, actionlessness, there is karma. Because of that, holding on to a thought. And someone else could be apparently dealing with money, dealing with people, buying, selling. But inwardly, she may have no attachment. That is karmani akarma. There are many meanings given to that beautiful puzzlesome shloka, 4th chapter, 18th shloka in Gita. Karmani akarmaya pashyet, akarmani cha karmayaha, sa buddhiman manusheshu, sa yuktaha kritsna karma krit. She or he has as though done everything. There is nothing more that needs to be done. If she or he has this understanding, she or he can see through where it is karma and where it is akarma. See through karma in akarma and akarma in karma. Anyway, let us not go more into Gita here. So, in order that one may clearly see what is tat and clearly see what is tvam, only when there is absolute clarity, then they are, just one. Tat is tvam and tvam is tat. That is what is meant by tattvamasi. The problem with all of us is, though we read and listen, or even talk, speakers talk and listeners listen, the Upanishads declare, not by just lot of listening, not by merely lot of even teaching. Nayamatma pravachanena labhyaha. That is speaking to people like us. Don't say that this lecture here in Gokhale Institute, is my kept account. 1230 seconds. Quantity is not at all the issue. Na ayam atma pravachanena labhyaha, na bahuna shrutena. So the Upanishad comes down on both audience and speakers. By merely giving a lot of lectures, don't think of yourself as great. By merely listening to a lot also, Atma is not got. It is not a matter of duration or quantity or books or volumes written or read. It is a quality. And that quality comes by Shravana. So you connect to the primary means. That is Vedic statement. Or Guru Upadesha, Acharya Upadesha. Then if it doesn't work, secondary means, therefore, logic is to be made subservient. Logic plays, as the English expression goes, second fiddle. I don't know music much. Fiddle is a musical instrument. There is a main person, I suppose, who plays, and all others are playing second fiddle. There is an orchestra. The conductor guides, directs, and then there is a lead person, then there are others. So playing a second fiddle, playing the second fiddle is an idiom. So, to use that idiom, we should say here, logic plays second fiddle and Shruti Vakya is the main one. Why? Is it because you are very attached to Vedas or are you a very traditional person? One may say. We have already said, it's not just a matter of attachment to tradition or being orthodox or this or that. Just think of it. This is so out of the way and one cannot by logic come upon this realization that I perhaps am not this personality. All along our tendency is to take this personality for granted. This is unquestionable. I am so and so, son of so and so, brother of so and so, with such qualification, da. It's a long list. All of them actually are a great summation, a great collection of aham vrittis. I used the word other day, I thought. I-thought, compound word, like soapbox. I thought. So to say I am son of such and such person is one I thought, because you have described yourself in terms of whose son you are. To say that I am a former student of BMS College of Engineering, I studied there passed from there in 73, if you say, that is a self-description. You describe yourself as a former student of the famous engineering college, 2 minutes walk from here, right? In 1,000 ways, moment you describe yourself, even emotionally, I'm a very short-tempered person, if you say. That is an aham vritti. This is a very important thing to figure out, especially if those of you who are into who am I inquiry of Maharshi Ramana, this will help you, in your inquiry. You should know what you are questioning. You are questioning not just the basic sense of I, but it is a description. Aham vritti. I am a woman, I am a man, I am old, I am young, I am a very emotional person, I am an erudite scholar, I am intellectual, I am very sensitive, I am selfish. In umpteen ways, when you have a description of who you are, which distinguishes you from another person, that is aham vritti. The Atma, which is to be known through Upanishad Vakyas, is akhandaika rasa. It doesn't distinguish itself from others. You cannot say, but could some Atmas be emotional Atmas? The Atma is, there is no question of, some Atmas. There is no some Atma is ekameva advitiyam. The clarity about there being only one Atma in all. This all is just a superimposition. All is just a appearance. The clarity about this is possible, is available in those awakened souls. A scintillating question answer with Sri Ramana Maharshi goes like this. They asked him, after enlightenment, does a man serve others? And his answer, born of such clarity, such Atmanishta, it sounds like out-of-box thinking. Question was, does a man, after enlightenment, serve others? Maharshi's answer was, after enlightenment, there are no others. Out-of-box. But it's not an intellectual, ingenuity. It's not some, Maharshi was such a clever person and so on. No, it's not cleverness. It was Anubhava Aruda. He did not see people coming to him with suffering as others. It is like you are very rich and another person is also very rich. You are a Karodpati, Kotyadisha. Another is also Kotyadisha. But one day the other person, your friend, has drunk and come and says, I don't know, the government is introducing some tax. I think I am in deep trouble. Will I be able to make the two ends meet? Some blah blah. He is blabbering something. You look at him, what happened to him? You will not take that statement for its face value. You will only concern yourself with how to help him get out of this intoxication. He is not in his mind. So for Maharshi too, when visitors came, he was seeing even the worst criminal, the jailbird or whoever, as no different from himself. He is also the same Atma. I have heard that somebody visited Sri Satya Sai Baba and liked the whole place, the seva going on and 100 things. Some foreigner, I guess. And the foreigner then while leaving said to Satya Sai Baba, Baba or Swami, I liked everything, but yesterday in your talk, you said, I am God. I didn't like that. Why do you say you are God? Some foreigner. But Satya Sai Baba's answer was very good. Like Ramana Maharshi's, Sri Sai Baba said to him, patting him on the back, I believe. I said, I am God. But don't you know? I also say, you are also God. Maybe that foreigner understood and appreciated. Or that foreigner said, this is now too confusing. This Indian spirituality goes above my head. It's too much beyond me. Maybe, we don't know. But Advaita, having raised it, some of you may have this question or may have faced this question. Oh, this Advaita Vedanta, Aham Brahmasmi, it makes you arrogant, it makes you proud. This makes you, already you have an ego which we are all seeing, and you attend this Vedanta and your ego will get fattened. This Advaita Vedanta is telling you, Tattvamasi Aham Brahmasmi. It's a sheer misunderstanding. Moment you understand Aham Brahmasmi clearly, there is no question of any superiority. Because instantly everyone is Brahma. If anyone thinks I am Brahma, Aham Brahmasmi, ete janaha Brahma na santi, yeshaha Brahma na asti, sa Brahma na asti, she is not Brahman, he is not, that fellow is half Brahman. Shantam papam. That is, sublime to the ridiculous. That is a movement from the sublime to the ridiculous. The clear understanding of Aham Brahmasmi is Brahma alone is Tom, Dick and Harry is Brahma, Sita, Gita and Nita is Brahma. Brahma the Pipilikanta Tanushu Yasam Vidujrambhate. The same awareness is Lord Brahma, the Chaturmukha Brahma, as well as a Pipilika, an ant crawling on the ground. That too is Brahma. That is the correct understanding. So how can there be even egoism? There is no egoism in right Vedanta. Therefore, Sri Shankara says, there's a long paragraph, but I will quote a beautiful one expression, because we are talking of what is the place of exercising logic, reason, tarka. What is the place of breaking our head on Upanishads or commentaries or even lectures like this? Some of you may want to hear this again. You take, let us say, a copy of the lecture from Gokhale Institutes. They have recorded, they are recording it. So you take it and break your head again, as though you have not suffered enough. Go home and, this Swamiji said certain things which have to be now thought over again. So you think over again. Why do you have to do it? The answer is given here. Shastra Yukti Abhyasaha. Acharya Shankara uses the word Shastra Yukti Abhyasaha. I would take liberty to translate Abhyasa as engaging, though once more the translation given here is application of reasoning. Application. Abhyasa is application. Repeated application. Application of reasoning ancillary to it. It means Shastra. Yukti Abhyasa is application of reason. Shastra Yukti Abhyasa. You apply, you engage, you use reasoning which is ancillary, which is subservient, which takes the second fiddle, which plays the second fiddle, that's the idiom, to Shastra. Because the problem with you is, though you thought you understood, you have not really understood. Certain remnants, certain residues of false perception are with the understanding you have of Tat or Tvam or Asi. Asi, of course, happens. Tat and Tvam. So Tat and Tvam have to be understood. Let me read that particular sentence. Padartha jnana purvakatvat vakyartha jnanasya iti ataha. Unless pada artha. Pada is word. A sentence is made of words. Tattvam asi. You are that is a sentence. It is made of 3 words. You, that and are. So, meaning of the sentence is vakya artha. And meaning of every word is pada artha. Padartha doesn't mean some, so elsewhere padartha is some object. In some of our Karnataka's places, padartha can mean some preparation in, today what is the padartha at lunch? They ask. Some preparation, some recipe and so on. But here it is word meaning. If word meaning is not clear, then how can you understand the import of the sentence? Tan prati eshtavyaha. Therefore it becomes desirable. Padartha viveka prayojanaha shastra yukti abhyasaha. Now the key part is shastra yukti abhyasaha, the application of reasoning ancillary to the shastra. I'll make the translation a bit easier. Is it has padartha viveka as the prayojana. If you engage in reason, then certain false associations, wrong associations go away. Just like if somebody comes and says, "Did you hear Ramarao passed away?" It's quite likely, because there are many people with the same name Ramarao. Among your friend circle there are 3 Ramaraos at least, 5 Ramaraos. So you get shocked. What? I met him just yesterday. Then the friend says, wait a minute, which Ramarao are you having in mind? No, my classmate, my former classmate. I am 54 now and he is also 54. He died? Especially when people of our age die, it gives a greater shock to us. That is a side remark, Somebody 10 years older to us doesn't shake us so much. Somebody 10 years younger also is taken as some kind of, they're sad, much younger. But somebody, our own classmate and our own, very similar to us, we are in trouble. Anyway, coming to this Ramarao case, first you took Ramarao to be your former classmate. Then the reporter says to you, I should have said before. I'm sorry, I didn't present it properly. We are talking of that person, if 6 months more he had lived, he would have been 100. That other person, not the one in Basavanagudi, other one in Malleshwaram. Oh yeah, I know him also very well. We attended a function in their house last month only. As they were saying, he is 99 and 5 months. And 7 more months he will be 100. We all actually did pranam to him. He came and sat and was present on the chair during the entire function. A very great man. He passed away. Very sorry to know that. You say. But your chest becomes much lighter. Not Ramarao of my age. That 99.5-year-old. So please see, Ramarao is the same name of both. So Tat can have many meanings. Tvam can have many meanings on different levels. Negation, we talked of Neti Neti. Neti Neti is no joke. Because there are so many layers of associations, meanings. I'm thankful to, I think he is here today also, the gentleman who asked me yesterday the question. It set me thinking and thinking last night, this morning, that there's some problem with this whole Vedanta, perhaps. In a very appropriate language, he said this. Because it is turning out to be a philosophy. People like, people love, speakers love to talk about it, audiences enjoy hearing it, but it doesn't seem to have, brought out true change. It's not, is it equipping really people? Is it equipping people to face problems, to face situations with equanimity, with samatva? You find that 99 out of 100 cases, those who have been attending Vedanta for years and years are as miserable, if not more miserable, when some tragedy strikes them. Right now I am in touch with an elderly lady in Hyderabad, years and years. In fact, she became a widow, and afterwards all she did was just attend as many Vedanta classes as possible. But recently she has fallen very sick, very sick. And we thought with so much of Vedanta that she has heard, she must be, lying on the sick bed but saying, it's all right, the body will go, but I am okay, or some such things. No, she is very miserable. She says, why did this happen to me? I wanted to enjoy for some more time. This pain is unbearable. Lot of self-pity. Unfortunately, the question asked yesterday has a lot of relevance, and leave aside the so-called people in the world out there, Vedanta students in Hyderabad or Delhi or England or America. Let's think of ourselves. What is wrong? See, to learn any subject, history or economics, maths or physics, and to become a professional and to deliver the goods, even a nurse, she has to be a proper nurse, good nurse, helping patients. Doesn't she have to study first of all properly and then learn some skills? Learn skills. Many of in almost every profession, in every field, it's not just some kind of overall idea. One has to pick up the skills. I guess there is the expression also, picking the ropes. One has to pick up the skill. In many fields these days, there are so many gadgets and instruments and how to hold them, how to, right? And for that there is a whole lot of training. I would say, you're welcome to raise that question again afterwards, but I would say, as I reflected on it, and I reflected on myself, everybody really, it became more clear to me than ever that here, it's not like the professions of the world out there, but we need to, as this word came here, Shastra Yukti Abhyasaha. Yesterday we had talked about Shastra Acharya Upadeshad Shamadamadi Abhyasataha Samskritam Manaha. The purification of the mind is not about learning that expression by heart. If you know, in fact, that lady in Hyderabad about whom I said, she knows so many shlokas by heart. But alas, where she slipped is, she fell in love with the words, shlokas, memorizing mantras, completing a line. Some of you might be doing that. Suppose I were to say, Dharma Kshetre Kurukshetre, you will say, Samaveta Yutsavaha. I have seen some places the audience doesn't allow me to speak. Audience doesn't allow me to sing. I too have an urge to sing, show off my shloka. But some members in the audience here and there I have come across. They have a stronger urge and they sing loudly. And they get a peculiar pleasure, as we speakers also get a peculiar pleasure. Suppose I sing along the what you call Shardula Vikridata Shloka. What is that first sloka of Dakshinamurti? Vishwam darpana drishyamana nagari tulyam nijantargatham pashyannatmani mayaya bahirivodbhutam yata nidraya yas sakshat kurute prabodha samaye swatmaname vadvayam tasmai shri guru murtaye namaidam shri dakshinamurtaye. I sing, and ladies and men and children, and it gives great pleasure to me. Done. I think I spoke so well. Sorry. A spiritual engagement is not about showing off how much memory you have, how clearly you pronounce, with no disrespect to that. I had met that lady some years ago, and she in fact recited some Vedanta shlokas which I also did not know. So I in fact felt great respect for her. Oh, she knows so many things. But now when she is on the sick bed and feeling so much of self-pity, misery, fear, insecurity, what will happen? And badly hoping that she would get a fresh lease of life. She will get well in a miraculous way. And of course I am putting a little spice to it, exaggerating. It's communication, I'm sure this at times she is able to recall Vedanta and she has her peaceful moments, I suppose. But she, at other times, she is very miserable. The difficulty or the trap that you and I have here is we just get attached to verbosity. If one can overcome that barrier of verbosity with no disrespect, it's good to know shlokas, but if your pleasure lies only in reciting shlokas and impressing somebody, then Vedanta will not help you. In fact, a very pertinent illustration I'll give. Once I was on the interview panel in Varanasi at a school, interviewing candidates who could come and teach physics. Since I have also some science background, they included me. Swamiji, please join. So I also sat. And one guy came and he said, I just came back from a conference in London, and somewhere else he attended some special science seminar, and somewhere else he presented a paper also on some nuclear physics or something. I thought this is a guy we should immediately catch, not let him go, if he is ready to serve as a teacher here. But a couple of others on the panel were more skilled than me to play the role of panelists. They said, that is all fine, you went to London, very good. You presented a paper at Delhi in some seminar on some very, very modern physics topic, very good. But tell us, some simple questions were asked to him. How do you explain to a ninth standard children, Newton's first law? He could not explain. All mixed up. I was shocked. Then I also asked him some other question about Faraday's law or something, He said something, and the way he said, if somebody who didn't know physics, suppose heard, would have been very impressed. But when you know physics, he is actually simply distorting. Then we saw this is a mental case. Then you may ask, but how did he go to? See, he had contacts. He was from some rich family. He had political contacts, influential links, and therefore, somebody, he went and attended some conference. Where sometimes you can join a conference and present a paper also, if you have some links. He went there. His grip on basics was so poor. So should our knowledge of Vedanta be like that? Bhuktaye natu muktaye. That is the case then. So, you think about it. There are certain basics and one has to work on it. There it is, on one hand, Shastra Yukti, Abhyasaha. On the other, we had touched upon it yesterday, the matter of purifying the mind. Never mind, suppose even this morning you fell a prey to anger or lust or greed or jealousy. Even this morning, just an hour before you came to this hall, your mind played the dirtiest tricks, let us say. Never mind. Don't go to past. Whatever has happened is over. Now, you go home, starting from this moment, you go home, suppose you sleep at 11 p.m. 8:30 to 11, 2.5 hours. Try to do a little Bhagavad Dhyana. Try to discharge some duty of yours. Try to be true to your conscience. That is the integration process. It's not about prayer and japa and puja only. Suppose you have promised somebody that you would call him. Please take the phone and call him. Keep your promises. Have that integrity in transactions. Because that is very much integral, very much part of the purification of mind. Either don't promise at all. Having promised, keep the promise. Or you promised and now you cannot keep the promise. You are not able. Take the phone and say, I'm extremely sorry, but I don't think I can give you what I promised. I'm ready to take some penalty, punishment. Apologize, and if that fails, how could you do this? Then give back that equipment or something. Sometimes something is given to you for discharging some job, responsibilities. That person says, please return that. Next morning, return it. Even though you don't want to return. Sometimes there are some privileges you enjoy some privileges of promising to do something for somebody, then you are not able to deliver the goods. And when they ask you to return those privileges, next morning return. Return to simplicity. That is part of Shama Damadi Samskritam Manaha. So act now. Act now. Forget the past. Then, please see the coming together. One is living in honesty, integrity, no matter how you lived even up to last 1 hour. Again, roll up your sleeves and live rightly. Do your best. And japa, tapa, sadhanas. Other is, today's topic especially, Shastra Yukti Abhyasaha. Study Vedanta and don't settle for just, one nurse may be holding the most sophisticated blood pressure instrument or some other instrument and going through the corridors. Most very expensive, imported, whatnot. But she might not be able to use it. She doesn't know how to handle it. Showing off. Like that fellow who said, I attended a seminar in London. He cannot teach 8th grade Newton's first law. Another nurse has a simple local brand of instruments, but she has been practicing the skills. First, she also did not know how to take a blood sample, how to measure blood pressure, how to measure glucose, and there's 100 things, But she practiced, she learned, and now she has that skill, right? It is a way. Same way you and I, we will be like the nurse who is showing off with an imported equipment and talking some big stuff, We will be like her, when? We chant shlokas and we browbeat others. What have you studied so far? I have studied Atma Bodha and Ishavasya. What about Chandogya? And Mandukya Karika? And that person says, no, I have never heard. If you have not studied Mandukya Karika, I tell you, your life is waste. Suppose, excuse me for indulging in a little dramatics. So you are giving importance to quantity or some big names or some big figures and trying to take protection behind some big Mahatma's name. I have been very close to that enlightened soul. He used to come and have breakfast with us. That is good if you had, It is a blessing. I don't say it doesn't mean anything. But don't take cover again under that. All that is utterly secondary. Have you engaged yourself in honest living and then Yukti Abhyasa. If you do so, Vedanta is sure to deliver the goods. Nididhyasana then takes place. Nididhyasana is meditation, simple translation, where having been freed of doubts, our topic this evening was reasoning, what is its place? Reasoning facilitates manana. So the topic is complete there. But Yajnavalkya's statement says, Atmava are Shrotavyaha, Mantavyaha, Nididhyasitavya. These are the three stages meant to make possible darshana. First he said Dashtavyaha, and if you ask how are we to see means no. For that three are mentioned. So to quickly mention what is Nididhyasana, Sajatiya Vritti Pravaha, then the same thought remains. You stay in that thought. Viruddha Pratyayahi Anantarita, they say. Antarita means in between contrary thoughts are creeping in. Anantarita, without other thoughts coming in, you stay in that steady appreciation of how, if the Hyderabad lady were to practice Nididhyasana, Manana and Nididhyasana, you can't have a shortcut, then by and large, even as she may have physical pain, definitely, but she will not have psychological conflict. She says, one day anyhow this body has to fall. She would not just say for saying sake. That's called lip service. But she would actually come to terms. Friends, I would conclude tonight's discourse saying, every one of us has tremendous capacity to come to terms, to reconcile, to be at peace with the greatest tragedy you can imagine. We have the capacity to bring forth that capacity which is in us, is the job of the Vedanta. We can come to terms with the greatest tragedies, health or wealth or some other loss or infamy. We are arrested and newspapers say finally we found the terrorist hiding here. This is the man. Infamy, bad name, mistaken, and we thrash us also. Some physical injury and bad name. Our family feels like committing suicide at the bad name that we brought to them out of being mistaken. For a good Vedantin, that cannot happen on real grounds, out of some mistake. Police mistake us. Suppose something. A Vedanta can empower you to see what is happening and yet be at peace. Fine. Okay, so I am in jail and the whole town, including my family, is talking of me as a number one hypocrite. We never knew and all that. Yes, it pains you on a certain level, but on a deeper level you can be at peace. Hari Om. A question or two for this evening? Yeah.
Swamiji, human race is one of the creation of the nature. And the Vedanta and the Adhyatma says, vehemently commands
Correct.
the human race
Yeah.
to renounce attachments.
Correct.
Is it not a negation of Srishti Tattva? The very object is defeated of creation.
Well said, well said. But sir, you are presuming that the Srishti, you used a very nice word, Srishti Tattva. His question says, we are part of creation and Srishti Tattva or the Srishti Vyavastha has put attachment also in us. And Vedanta says, give up your attachment. See, Vedanta doesn't say give up your attachment to everybody. You don't expect, suppose you take me to a high school here in NR colony. I'm not going to say, children, you should not try to get a good job and marry and all that. I know so many people who married and they are not truly happy, I tell you. No, Vedanta actually is, it doesn't say to everyone. If everyone is told, it is very great injustice. You are right, it would be violation of the Srishti Tattva. But Vedanta recognizes that the Srishti Tattva or the Srishti Vyavastha has inbuilt in it the higher possibility. At any time, even in this Kali Yuga, 21st century and whatnot, there is a certain small percentage of people who are on the fence, who are capable of dropping their attachment. It is to them that the Vedanta says, you can do it, do it. And generally what happens is those who cannot give up at all, they will not continue to attend. It becomes so tasteless for them. Those who continue to attend, even including that Hyderabad lady, unfortunately she slipped somewhere. Somewhere the gurus, in fact, did not really hold her hand and help her. That's sad. But otherwise, those of you who love Vedanta are intuitively seeing that I can do this. I can. You have the capacity. But then if the training it falls short of a little bit here and there, then that is sad part. You would not. Therefore, this Srishti Tattva is violated if all are told to renounce. This Vedanta is not at all meant for all. But you could be that 0.001%. That is the, you could be. Never think, I am among the majority. How do you know? You could be in that small minority who has the capacity. So Srishti Tattva has room for that possibility too. 1 in a million. And you could be 1 in that million. Here?
This one will be very nice, especially the thought process.
Thank you.
But what I feel is Vedanta, especially Bhagavad Gita, has got answer for everything.
Mm-hmm.
Only thing is, we poor Indians, we are not understood Gita very well. Then Annamaya Kosha, Pranamaya Kosha. Bhagavad Gita covers all the things. Great psychological.
Right.
But one question I wanted to ask you is the thought process, whatever you talk.
Yeah.
Whether to concentrate on Atman or to not to have any thought, in silencing our thoughts. What do you recommend?
See, silencing our thought is part of the whole sadhana. For example, practice of Shama, Shamadama. Shama is Shanti. Shama is quietening the mind. When something bad happens, you tend to get agitated. When others do something which is very bad, you get agitated. Or your business fails, some transaction fails. Or sometimes for us sadhakas, when we slip and fall, one is the slip and fall, Once I was in Tiruvannamalai and over some auto, that auto fellow, I didn't know much Tamil and he doesn't know Kannada. So something he said and I thought he was asking for 10 rupees. And I gave 10. And he started saying, it is 25 rupees. And I got very angry. So, but finally I don't remember whether I gave or not. But one is we slipped, we got angry. And afterwards for several hours I was feeling guilty. At Ramana Ashram in Tiruvannamalai I lost temper. This is such a shame. And I am a Vedanta teacher. I was a brahmachari in yellow clothes those days, some 25 years ago. What a shame. Aparadi manobhava. There also applies this, calming the mind, being free of thought. Practice Shama. Sit down and just say Arunachala Shiva, Arunachala Shiva. Don't feel guilty because...
Again, thought process will be active now.
No, even for a little while you can calm the mind. It may come up again. All of us are capable of calming the mind for some time at least.
Here I am coming to 6th chapter again, sir.
Yeah,
Atman,
correct. Atmanyevam, what is that? Atma samstam mana krutva nakinchidapi chintayet. 6th chapter of Gita.
Again, when you concentrate on Atman, your thought process becomes active. So silencing the thoughts is the greatest thing.
No, I think it is incomplete if you only silence the thought. That is half the story. You need to silence the thought and then you need to inquire. Otherwise, great teachers have clarified. If you just quieten the mind, you feel very good at that time, but hidden tendencies don't go at all, or the hidden beliefs don't go at all. Maharishi Ramana gives the example, a guru was very thirsty when he and his disciple were passing through a jungle, and the guru said to the disciple, I am so thirsty, get me some water. And the guru sat down below a tree. The disciple went. Unfortunately, the source of water was pretty far. The Guru was unable to bear his thirst, but he was a great yogi. So he calmed his mind, quietened his mind, and went into a kind of samadhi. No sensation at all. After half an hour, the disciple brought water and found this Guru is in samadhi. This interesting story this is. Some Guru's disciple says, Guru, Acharya, here is water. After saying 2 or 3 times, the Guru opened his eyes and the Guru said, where is the water? Maharshi says this to say that though he had quietened his mind, that whatever thought he was, it was there before, it emerged again. So the idea is just quietening the thought doesn't change the content of our mind. If I was attached to money, to pleasure, if I have calmed the mind, after some time when the mind again becomes active, I would again want money, pleasure, status and so on. Whereas by vichara, inquiry, contemplation, study, discussion, dialogue, you strike the hammer on your belief that money, I need money. I want to be famous. That belief gets hit, it gets struck. Therefore, in simple summary, sadhana involves primarily vichara and secondarily shama. Calming but thinking, inquiring, both are needed. Yeah.
Science versus religion was a very popular debating topic.
Yes, correct.
During our,
Yeah.
But now with your thesis that reasoning or logic, you have to accept Mahavakya and have to subserve Mahavakya.
Correct.
It means that in the religion, I think we have to accept the Mahakavya.
Correct. Mahavakya. Yeah, correct.
And then only, that means that's where science differs completely.
Correct.
And it gives open field.
Correct.
It says we are assuming these are the assumptions, and then we are further investigating.
Correct.
Always there is scope for.
Oh, yeah.
But in religion, I think that is not done.
True.
I felt
Yeah.
it's an interesting thing.
Correct.
I felt science is on the right side. I felt like that. Sorry, though.
No, that I understand.
We are not equal.
Yeah.
For both religions.
True. Yeah.
But I felt from your
True.
lecture, I felt science is on a better, is on more right side compared to religion.
Well, I too see that point of yours, but it is maintained. But think about it. In human life, there are 4 purusharthas: artha, kama, dharma, and moksha. Now, Upanishads talk about moksha. Actually, not only moksha vichara, even in dharma, science cannot establish. There is more and more logic, counterpoint, point and counterpoint, point and counterpoint. Both in dharma and in moksha, the Indian traditional view is Vedaha Pramanam. And that is said to be not a violation of logic or openness, etc. It is, today we touched upon it a little bit. It is said that you got to accept because the nature of what you are trying to know is way beyond intellect. Radhakrishnan's statement, religion is beyond reason. But in no way human values are violated here. She is saying that I accept, you also accept, and if I go for violence, that will be fanaticism. Vedanta is not at all going for fanaticism, because fanaticism and encroaching upon others' liberty, treading on others' feet, etc., that is not at all the flavor or the spirit of the Vedanta. Satya, ahimsa, etc. are to be safeguarded, and then in the matter of inquiry into truth, because of this truth being an extraordinary thing, it is said you accept. So it is that's what Shankara said, right? Purushamati vairupyat, or that inability to, the tarka not being by its nature, it's not capable of reaching a finality. So it's a matter of area. Science, therefore you see, with all these advancements of science, where has science given the gift of freedom to human being. Scientists themselves, a whole lot of scientists towards the evening of their life, they turn towards some kind of spirituality because they find there's so much politics, so much of ego clash and so on and so forth in a whole lot of scientific places. Great scientists, but they burn with not all, but many of them are seen to be burning with jealousy or some kind of heartburn they have. So some scientists discover that, well, science is great, but if I want peace of mind, I need to get back to, so these are but ultimately, we must be honest to ourselves. We must be true to ourselves. Unless we discover that in this matter we got to go for faith, we should not, just because somebody says we should not go for faith. Once more, your question is highly thought-provoking, sir. Thank you. So we have 2 more evenings. So let's meet again tomorrow. Hari Om. Om Namo Narayana.